Hey everybody, welcome back to Sounds Like a Drum, a Cadence independent media production. We are on into season 3, finally, super exciting, and we just wanted to let you know that we are doing this entirely via the support of the patrons on our Patreon. If you're interested in being involved in that and helping us continue to do this work, please follow the link below. Check out the Patreon, check out the levels, and help to ensure that we can continue making this content for you going into this year where everybody's, at home and hanging out and looking at their drums a lot. Today's episode, we are getting into something that I've never tried before, which is a few different possibly useful ways to use gaff tape on the snare side head of your drum. If you've ever heard of anybody doing this, you've considered trying it out for yourself, this is the episode for you. All right, straight into it. We have used a lot of gaff tape at this studio. I've used a lot of gaff tape at a lot of studios. It's one of those things that does a lot for a lot, and particularly for drums, because it's not just for fixing things, it's also for changing your sound. We have gone deep on gaff tape on the tops of the drums a lot. And I'm a person who doesn't really ever do aftermarket things to the snare side head on drums. It just wasn't something that I came up with. I didn't see it being done. And so this is kind of an adventure for me too, because I've never done this before. And it had been a topic of conversation on some forums and on our channel, things like that. So we went and kind of looked up a few of the things that people have tried and have reasons why they use these techniques. And so we're just going to kind of try them out and see what they sound like. All right, so first off, the House Superphonic. Nothing on it, just the normal setup like we normally use. All right, it sounds like a drum. It's a Superphonic. It's in most of our videos, and it sounds great. So the first thing we're going to do is a small kind of a Kleenex patch that we're going to tape offset from the snare wires, more or less like 90 degrees away from the wires. Kind of the way that you would do to a batter head, basically, to just sort of mellow it out, maybe take some overtones away, maybe reduce a little bit of sustain. See what that's going to do. Here we go. All right, so the sound speaks for itself. It is different. It's somewhat subtle, and definitely there's some high end taken away. It's a bit drier. It behaves slightly differently. And if you dig the sound, that's what we did to get it. We're not going to retune the drum at all in this video. Next up is 2 strips of tape underneath the wires, basically a third of the way across, so the wires are laying across these. This is going to, I think, probably have a bit more of a dramatic effect than the last one. All right, so this is actually reducing contact that the wires would normally be making across the head, which is definitely modifying, drying, taking more high end away even still, making it a little bit boxy. It doesn't feel boxy, it still feels the same, but definitely a different animal than just the raw snare wires. Now, number 3, this is something that I've actually seen, and this isn't as much of like a sound thing as it is kind of a protective thing, at least, or that's how I've seen it, and that is to use a larger piece of tape, but what we're doing is we're placing it underneath the plates at the ends of the wires. And I believe that the original idea behind this was more to make sure that if the solder joints on the wires aren't clean, you don't get a puncture on your head and you don't ultimately blow your snare side head out by slowly ripping it by wailing away and having the wires moving up and down and rubbing away at the head. And as you'll see, we discovered that it also has a little bit of an impact on the sound. All right, so this is actually still pretty functional because we have essentially all of the wires still on the head, and we also didn't add a whole lot of mass to the head, so the change isn't so dramatic. We still get some clarity, but there is a little bit of a kind of like sizzle that's gone. It's a little bit of a shorter sound, and I actually liked this. I enjoyed playing it. I wanted to play it more. It was the one of the modifications that felt the best to me, acoustically where I'm sitting and just in terms of like striking the drum. So let's hear them back to back and see how that sounds. Now, here's the other side of the coin. When you start messing around with this stuff, you have to be careful not to damage your wires while you're doing it, because if your wires are on the drum and you're trying to put tape underneath the wires and you're pulling up on the wires or you're pulling up on the end plates to get the tape underneath there, it's very easy to bend the wires a little bit. And in previous videos, we've shown that even a little bit of a twist in the wires or a couple of the wires kind of tented up can drastically screw up your snare sensitivity and make the drum both sloppy and choked at the same time because you're not getting even tension. So my recommendation is to definitely take the wires off, even if it's just one end. On a Supra like this, they're tied on one end, so it's pretty easy to just take them up that way. But just be very careful with your wires, but treat them like they're gonna fall apart, because especially if they're fresh or if they're in good condition, you don't want to goof them up in the process. And the sounds you'll be hearing if you do aren't going to necessarily be because of the tape. It might be because the wires got screwed up. Provided you're being careful with your wires, this is a wonderful, minimally invasive, and ridiculously inexpensive opportunity to experiment with your personal drum and see what these things do, because I guarantee that if we did this to any other drum in the shop, it would behave slightly differently, maybe extremely differently. Based on what it did, particularly with the end plates, I'm thinking about my baritone snare and how it can get a little wild because of how low I like to tune it. So kind of compressing the sound on the snare side might actually be awesome for that drum. I'm probably going to do it when I get home today. This is also something where you can make minor adjustments, less cloth if you're doing the Kleenex, or maybe only one strip if you're doing it over the center. There's just infinite options that, depending on your instrument and the heads you're using, it's really a choose your own adventure kind of thing. Now, as a little additional thing today, since this is a snare wire specific episode, we went ahead and mic'd the snare side of the drum with a secondary microphone as well, to just sort of involve it in the mix so we could really hear exactly what's happening. And if you want to hear some comparisons and some A/B stuff about that, jump over to the Patreon. There's going to be some special content over there for Acrolite and above members, so you can hear a little more detail and a little more comparison about how the top and the bottom are interacting with each other with these different muffling things at this tuning. So that about kind of wraps it up. The big thing to remember here, beyond just like keeping an eye on your wires and making sure that they don't get weird in the process, is that snare side heads are about as thin as it goes in terms of mass for things on a drum set. So anything that you would do to your 10 or 12 mil or double ply batter, a fraction of that amount of muffling will make a huge impact on the snare side head. So you don't have to go crazy, and little increments is probably where it's at to make sure that you're not over saturating it with that stuff. It's worth noting that we didn't apply tape to the wires in any of these, which is a thing that sometimes it gets demonstrated online, or people talk about taping the wires to the head. We don't really find any sounds in that we consider to be useful, and the risk to your wires is problematic there. So if you have tons of extra snare wires and you want to try that out, that's up to you. We are not recommending that, and we certainly don't have infinite wires here, so we went ahead and just kind of skipped over that. All right, thanks for watching and joining us for Season 3. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and click the notification bell below so that you find out about our new videos dropping. We're going to be doing 2 a week for the next few weeks to kind of get caught up on all the things that we're excited about. Please go to the Patreon, check it out, help us keep doing this. Now more than ever, we are dependent on the support of the viewers like yourself, and we really appreciate all the support from the people that are just coming and helping and taking care of us right now, and allowing us to continue doing this work is really important to us, and we are so happy to get to share these things with you as we're going forward in Season 3. As usual, if you have snare side taping techniques that you use, or if you've tried it and it was a total nightmare, please let us know in the comments. I'm always curious, and this is for sure one thing that I have zero experience. Today was my first time. And yeah, enjoy drumming, stay home, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.